Gotcha. And I will maybe pause recording. Wait a second. I love reading all the BMCs. And honestly, for me, the greatest part is that you're now starting to jump into business modeling, and that's really wonderful. So, in after this day, Ari, we're going to be following up with a survey, and in there should be a link where you will be able to upload your final version of your business model canvas. And that's fine if that's the only one you're submitting, but that's really the important one. If you did it earlier, we got to really kind of offer you a comment or two about some places to jump into deeper. But if you upload that final BMC, we'll go over it. And then we'll offer some comments and be able to offer you the digital certificate, which we hope that you display proudly because honestly, we really do appreciate all of you taking the time to join us after work, after life. We understand, and we really hoped that this program brought a lot of a really value add to you. And we have so many MWBEs from all over New York State, and we understand the struggle. We worked with so many companies that have just explained what they've gone through just to get that certification and maintain it and really compete out in that market. And that's really what we hope to offer everyone in this program. So great question, Ari.
Yeah, no, thank you, Eric. And I am just so impressed with the entrepreneurs who are joining us this evening, who have been with us really for the past 4 consecutive weeks. Some people may say, oh, 2 hours on a Tuesday night, 4 times, what's the big deal? It is a big deal because we are, as we get to know the participants, as we converse with you guys, you are some of the busiest people in this state. And Eric and I are busy guys also, and Gina's a super busy person. But man, you guys are really busy and finding that time to really go deeper on cannabis, to learn more about the industry. I hope by the end of today that people have a better idea of what the opportunities and challenges are in New York's cannabis industry, and they're in a better position to make a decision. I want to go after this opportunity. This one isn't right for me, but this is where I can see adding value, and this is where I want to go deeper, and this is one I want to pursue. I'm very excited about tonight's program, Eric.
Yeah. All right. So let's kick this thing off, Rari. I know we have so much amazing information today. Uh, Let me start by introducing what's it's probably my primary home. So I think I spend more time here. This is the Koffman Incubator. I'm very proud of this building. It's actually a nonprofit located up here in Binghamton, New York. It's actually the home of IBM and the home of virtual reality. Little plug for my little town here. But we opened in 2017. So we, in fact, are a startup ourselves. We work with after our soft landings program, I think we're up to 14 countries. We work with companies in 14 countries. Luckily, they all speak English because I'm not very multi-dialect. But we're very proud that all of our companies collectively, since our opening, have raised $158 million. It's really incredible. So very proud of all the work that these folks are doing here.
That that's really unbelievable, Eric. And I want to add something here. I don't know if I've mentioned this before. We have entrepreneurs from across the state with us tonight. We have entrepreneurs who have registered for the program who are watching it on YouTube and coming back with questions, so on and so forth. There's certainly people who are entrepreneurs from the Binghamton area, from the Southern Tier, from Buffalo, from Rochester, but we also have a fair amount of entrepreneurs from the greater New York City, Long Island area here. And certainly there are going to be retail opportunities, delivery opportunities, ancillary opportunities in the greater New York City area. But for those of you who are interested in cultivating cannabis or processing cannabis, really kind of the manufacturing part of the supply chain, it's almost impossible to do that in the New York City area given the cost of real estate. If you're looking for a good area to build a business, I have to recommend the Southern Tier. I
No,
think it is a very business friendly environment. The local counties and towns are supportive. It's really a great place to build a business, and and Koffman Incubator has been part of so many new businesses in the Southern Tier.
I appreciate that. Yeah, actually, I will say that Broome County, unlike probably any other county in the U.S., is so friendly to entrepreneurship. They're actually wonderful, wonderful partners, and even invest their own money into helping our startups. That really is unheard of to have that sort of government partnership. So we're very lucky to be positioned here. Let's get to the less interesting thing. I guess there's me. Let's do quick introductions. I am one of the directors at the Koffman, involved in the programming. I am completely tickled by the business model canvas, which is why I am honored to try to introduce all of you to it. I do speak internationally on the business model canvas, the BMC as we call it. While I haven't worked in the THC markets, I did start our area's first CBD company. Gosh, it must have been maybe 7 years ago. I've since exited all interest in cannabis so that I can mentor and not have any conflict. I actually started my path as a chef, went to the CIA, later became a clinical dietitian, and spent a lot of years in both geriatrics and then working with folks living with HIV and AIDS. Very passionate about that. Uh, and of course, on top of that, why have any free time? I decided to become an inventor, which really is where I got to where I am today. And I now mentor companies in 10 countries, and from New York to Oregon. So I'm very honored to be involved with all these people's lives.
And Eric, not to put you on the spot, but which country are you remoting into tomorrow?
Yeah. Tomorrow I talk with a company in Serbia. I have a lot of
Unbelievable.
interactions with. They actually are Emmy nominated last year, and this year I just found out today they won trivia. Oh, I should look it up. I haven't heard of it, but they just won a big two bronze awards in Manhattan for their 360 video production. So too immersive for you if anyone wants to go check it out. It's awesome. But yeah, it's a lot of fun working with people in different countries and really learning about different business models because every company is quite unique, and that's really what today I think kind of comes down to is how do we create unique business models that help us compete against others.
Love
So
it.
this is, oh, go ahead, Ari.
No, 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 no. I just I love what you guys are doing globally, what you're doing, and you know, even this accelerator program. You guys are in the southern tier, but with these Zoom webinar tools, we're really able to reach throughout the state and beyond. So it's exciting times.
It really is technology. While it may not work all the time, some of our tests in the first session didn't work, but Zoom is great. But let's get into it. We're going to talk about cost and revenues today, and thought about what to really express with everyone today in terms of cost and revenues. I didn't want to just talk about, well, cost is something that makes your checkbook goes negative and revenues make it go positive. Like, come on, folks. We have actual entrepreneurs on the call. So how do we look at this in a way that makes us competitive? How do we make an invincible company by truly understanding costs and revenues? So we talked about in the last 3 weeks the idea that the business model canvas is also, or it could be referred to as the theater of business. We talked about the back of the house, your key partners, your key activities. These are the things that make the show actually go on, right? Your stage crew. We talked about the front of the house, your customers, right? The front facing thing. But now we have the ticket booth, and I think that actually is my term. The other two I didn't actually create. But this really is that relationship between the business and the customer. In fact, this is where you prove that your model works. And so the whole point of teaching you the BMC is that it's business modeling. We're creating, if you will, an equation or like this figure that is going to help us compete against everybody else, because the first step is realizing it's not good enough to just buy something and sell it. It's not good enough. What we need is to actually create models that make us invincible. And so this is where it's really, I think it kind of ends. Let's put it that way. And so let's get into really what these two parts are. We're talking about viability. Is your business viable? I once worked with this company that totally nailed desirability and feasibility. They were making rope out of hay. The hay was even being given to them for free. Everything was wonderful. Everyone wanted this. But when we looked at the viability of this company, they were making $1 an hour, $1 an hour. So no, you can't make rope out of hay and do that in their case. I think we ended up making grocery bags. But anyways, viability. Is your business model going to work? Right? We have this awesome idea. We have customers that want it. We have all the build or borrow or buy. We have all the resources to make it happen. But is it viable? So cost structure really is looking at all the different things that we have to pay in order to make this happen. And having the lineup that we do today, that the knowledge you're going to receive about look, the math in cannabis is not simple. This is not, selling food at the market. There is some crazy tax things. There's investments we have to think about. There's startup costs. It's very complex. And then there's revenue streams, which maybe this should be for everyone like me, but I love talking about revenue streams. And it's not just like, oh yeah, you got to make lots of money. Yeah. No, it's not that simple. I actually really love talking to people about diversifying revenue streams. So it'll be very interesting for us to look at. But first, let's look at types of costs that we have. So obviously there's one-off costs. So, if you're planning on starting a cultivation and you don't have the cultivation greenhouses yet, or any of the buildings, or HVAC, or security systems, and fencing, and video cameras, that's a lot of costs right up front. That's kind of a one-off cost, right? We have to get over this giant financial hurdle just to get in the game, just to play in the game. We have to cross that bridge.
Hey, Eric, can I jump in here? Because
Please.
I know that, through survey data and speaking to a lot of the participants, certainly the ability to raise the amount of funds that they need to launch their new cannabis business is really a concern. And Gene's going to talk about fundraising techniques later in the program. Peter's going to talk about business plans. Just as sort of a back of the envelope rule of thumb, in terms of how much capital you need, you kind of reverse you go through the cannabis supply chain. Cultivation, I would say, is the most expensive.
Mhm.
It could be $3 to $5 million depending on the size of your facility. Processing could be $1 to $3 million depending on the size of what you're trying to do and the output and the capacity. Dispensaries in the 1 to 2 million zone. Ancillary businesses, okay, selling in services, whether it be logistics, transportation, technology, marketing, etc., could be a lot less. So when entrepreneurs are thinking about what part of the supply chain should I get into, they need to take these things into account. I know that some of these numbers seem overwhelming. It's understandable. I believe that the state of New York is going to offer more loans to cannabis entrepreneurs than any other state in the country. Than any other state in the country. And I think MWBEs are going to be well positioned for these loan funds. Now, a lot of the details haven't been decided yet. A lot of the programs are not official, but I think New York is going to create really a pool of funds for cannabis entrepreneurs, and there's a reason to be hopeful. Of course, nobody should rely on all of their startup costs coming in the form of a loan from the state of New York. It could be a piece of the puzzle. You still need to develop your own fundraising strategy, but I believe the state's going to play a really important role here, Eric.
That would be wonderful. I know they're doing so much in New York. I really do think we are going to be the model for the rest of the country. But this stuff is important to think about and really, kind of work out in your business plans. We really need to answer for all these types of things. And even if we get a very cheap loan from the state, still a loan, still a loan. I don't know if they're going to give grants. We'll see, but
Yeah. And Eric, I usually don't do this, but we're getting so many questions coming in,
Hmm,
so I'm just going to read a few out if that's okay now.
sure.
Um, uh, we have a question. Is it possible to start a cultivation with none of my own money? It's possible. It would be great if you were able to contribute something meaningful to you. I think investors understand that entrepreneurs come from different backgrounds and have different financial resources, but it would be great if you can contribute something to it. I have another question saying I've read there's hefty upfront application fees for licensing. Any insight into that? Nicole, I don't think New York is going to levy hefty application fees. I believe it's going to be reasonable, and it's going to be accessible to MWBs and other folks. That's my hope. We don't know yet, so we don't know yet, but that's my hope. I don't see hefty fees coming in with applications right now. Um, and another question is, do we know of any other states offering state funding in this fashion? The social equity and diversity in the cannabis industry and how states finance new businesses is a really new area. I don't know that any state has nailed it just yet. There's certainly examples, local examples in California. There are interesting partnerships going on now in Connecticut. There are interesting partnerships in Illinois, but there aren't a lot of great examples yet. And one of the things that we're going to do, Eric, that you and I spoke about after this program has ended, is to the extent that there's more information coming out, new regulations coming out. We're going to be emailing all of the Opportunity Grows Accelerator participants and keeping you guys updated. Certainly, you should check the state websites. You should continue reading whatever materials you'd like to, but we'd love to keep in touch. Follow us on social, and we're going to try to keep this cohort really updated as new information becomes available.
Yeah, I think I think one of the best tools is information, especially when you're going up against large corporate players. We need to be smart. So moving with staying smart, ongoing costs. Ongoing costs. I won't get on my preaching pedestal here, but if you're going to get into cultivation, think about energy costs. And I don't just mean the lights, because those have gotten pretty cool, but maybe think about the HVAC costs and ongoing costs. Even if you have a retail store, think about maybe the security. There's all sorts of things that are going to be required. I like ongoing costs. Usually they're somewhat fixed, and that means you can plan for them. You can put them into a model, things line up, they fit, kind of like balancing your budget. And that's, really where there's certain things that are truly fixed costs. Uh, Lighting, heating, I don't know if I would call that fixed so much anymore. I know here in the southern tier, I think NICEAG just jacked our electricity costs, but there is all sorts of fixed costs. And I personally like to set up even personal finances based on fixed costs, because it's fixed. It won't change. And when it comes to your business and the bottom line, if you can count on a number being a number, then you know what you have to make more than that so that you stay in the green or the black. So fixed costs, they're really great. But there is totally a place for variable costs, right? So fixed costs you can use to really, let's say, balance the budget, right? Let's use fixed costs to make sure that our company is viable. We will make money. We can pay everyone their salaries. We're making enough money to do that. Great. There's always variable costs, but this is where we can actually really work on making better profit off the work we're doing. So maybe we're working in scale, we're going to buy a lot more of containers, or maybe we're going to find resources that we can buy recycled containers in order to bring that variable cost down. So if you think about it, fixed costs, right, they're there. Let's just deal with them, put them into your business model to make sure it fits. Then add the variable costs and start to ask yourself, how can we make these variable in your own favor? Of course, we want to make those costs go down, but there's ways we can do that, or plans. You can plan to expand year 2 or year 4, where these variable costs, where economies of scale, buying things in large quantities, can really end up giving us more money in our pockets. So here it is, just a quick summary though. Fixed costs, they're usually more economical than variable. I don't know if that's necessarily always true. It's kind of a weird sentence, but I think it's more economical in that we can plan on them, and that makes a better budget because look, it's the number's not going to change. It's fixed. It's always going to be like that. And then using variable costs in order to make more profit or to do some sort of planning to make the business keep its money or make more money. Think of variable costs that way. So really, you're using two different philosophies for either cost. Cost structure, basically, this is talking about how are you going to pay to make that value proposition for your customers. So it's again, this is really hinting towards that business model. What are you going for with your business? How are you spending your money to identify what you are? And so we kind of have two general ways of looking at this. One is a value driven business, and the other is a cost driven business. And I'll get to what these are in just a second. But they really have a very profound effect on what you want your business to actually be. So a value driven business, and I think I have there we go, a slide on that. Think about like Rolex. Not that it's a value like it's cheap, but people are spending huge Dyson. You spend huge amounts of money because it's the best. There's going to be all sorts of things in the cannabis world, whether it's a flower or it's a testing machine or it's this or it's that. You buy it because it's the best. That's what I want. I want to be the best. I'm going to do the best. Well, you're going to pay to be the best. So make sure your model actually is designed. You have the customers that are going to be able to help you afford to buy the best. Or you can be a cost-driven structure. So like IKEA, perfect example. Yes, furniture can be expensive, but IKEA sells so much of this stuff, and it really is a very lean manufacturing process for them. It makes it affordable for everyone. They're cost-driven. They're thinking about cost, not necessarily the value that you get from the product, right? I've actually never owned IKEA, but I seem to use them a lot in examples, just as a little brief there. So what are some,
Eric, I can jump in here.
please.
Our family has enjoyed many different items from IKEA. I am relatively unskilled with my two hands, but my wonderful wife Annie is able to assemble pretty much anything from IKEA, and it served us well, particularly when you buy kids furniture or even just regular furniture. It's always affordable there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, when you go into IKEA, you're getting a competitive price. You don't need to take out your phone and compare it. How much does this bookshelf cost somewhere else? You just know. That's the underlying assumption when you walk into IKEA that you'll come home with a good deal.
And that's really a awesome example of mastering the business model because they have worked to sell the lowest price item, right? It's not that it's the cheapest. It's not made out of paper. I mean, it's furniture, but the model, the way they sell, the way they structure everything, it's meant to lower the price. So some things that you can think about when you're looking at your business and you're working out your costs and things on your business model canvas, ask yourself these things. Where are we spending our money? Where are you actually spending your money? Start to question those things. Are there costs that, can I just buy something once and not have to rent it for the next 5 years? I've always done that with my internet. Why rent my modem from who? I could just buy one and then be done with it. Or should we change our cost structure to improve our chances of success? I won't we don't have time for me to tell the whole story, but if you look at the history of Nintendo and how they ended up competing against Xbox and PlayStation, they completely changed their cost structure. They ended up going for very low tech, which allowed them to now be in every nursing home and in grandparents' houses and all things like that. Really brilliant stuff. So let's also cover revenues quickly. If I haven't mentioned it yet, Ari, I love revenue streams. I think it's so interesting that no matter what you do, there's multiple ways or fashions for you to earn money. It's so cool, right? Uh, so one of them transaction based. So that, that's just kind of, buy something and the one-on-one there, like a deli. Services, right? We certainly know that idea of providing services to people. Perhaps you get paid to do a project. If you're a master grower right now, I have a feeling there is lots of cultivation places around New York State that would love to pay you to do some sort of project, right? So very cool. The funding streams on all of these are very different, and we'll see that soon. Recurring revenue. This is one of my favorites, right? This is bam. Once you get that customer in, that check just keeps coming. You can this is what I use to balance off my fixed costs, because these are recurring revenues. They just keep coming. So subscription fees, brokering fees, anything like that where you're getting paid just monthly. I get paid $100 monthly. Great. That's a recurring revenue. And I'm going to match that with my fixed costs, because I need to balance those out. And both of these are somewhat fixed, if you will. But a better way of looking at it is you need to diversify how your money comes in. So folks, if you're going to start a cultivation greenhouse, you're going to spend, like Ari mentioned, a lot of money to get it started. And how long does it take to grow a cannabis plant? A little while. You're going to have a little while with no money coming in, but money coming out. So if you could diversify how the money flows back in, you will stay substantial. You will stay operationally sustainable. That's kind of my magic word at the incubator. So if you look at transaction-based revenues, right, it's you don't know how much it's going to be each time. Someone might buy something more or less, but it happens a lot more often. Services could last a little bit or a long time, same as projects. And then recurring revenues could be on all their own sort of cycles. And the goal here, the reason I'm showing all these different things to you is really, I like if every business has at least 3 of these 4 things going on. That way, when you really look at your budget, staying solvent every month you have money coming in from different places. And that also helps keep you to be helps you be an adaptable business. So no matter what's going on in the environment, look, we have money coming in different places. So if one starts to suffer, we can really focus on another one and make sure at the end of the month, everything is good. And again, just to kind of balance out these ideas, the yin and yang of money, we have the left side is kind of our cost, right? Cost of goods, right? That's not going away. Employees, definitely not going away. We had a wonderful presentation from Nikki Ketterman in the union. If you want to understand how to really make employees affordable and offer them a wonderful job opportunity, look at our cannabis unions in New York. Really cool stuff. Cost of doing business, taxes. Oh my God, I'm glad you're on today's session so we could talk about taxes. But permits, rent, right? Unbelievable stuff. Marketing. These things are expensive. So the left side, this is a lot of the cost. The right side, right? The other side of this union, sale of goods, right? What kind of stuff are we selling? Flowers or distillates or bath bombs. I think that's what it's called. The idea is diversify. Sell merchandise, shirts and stuff. Like you don't have to just sell the one thing. You could really diversify all sorts of products, but make sure it's based on what your customers really are asking for. And then partnerships. Why not help other people with what you've learned now that you've gotten to the place that you are here? So this to me is what makes me feel confident about businesses when you truly understand all the different costs and what it really means. Fixed, variable, people, taxes, cost of goods, all this stuff, right? Lots of costs. We have to know what they are. But then we have to balance it with all sorts of revenue streams. My favorite term. So this is really, and again, especially in cannabis, I just can't stress enough that we have to make sure that these scales are not balanced, but more revenue coming in, right? Because we really need to plan for the future, but understanding both sides of this model will really help paint that picture for what you have to work on creating in order to provide your value propositions to your customers. And that's how understanding revenue and costs make your business viable. So with that, I think we're going to take a 5-minute break, but I'm happy to take any questions. I think we might have a couple of minutes for questions.
Yeah, so Eric, thank you. That really was a terrific wrap up of the business model canvas. We have a question. That states the follows. What do we do after the incubator? I feel inspired to pursue my cannabis business idea, but I do believe that I'll need additional help. What do you suggest we do as the next step? Is there an existing digital network for Opportunity Grows graduates and cohort participants to continue to grow, learn together? How can we engage further with Ari, Eric, and others?
Wow, that's a very inspiring message. Thank you for whoever said that. I think there's a few things. Um, I want everyone to continue to work on their business model canvas. I love joking with people. I have 14 businesses in my basement, all on the business model canvas. I made them. It didn't work out. They go in the basement. I work on a new one. But the point is, continue to work on this skill. The second part of that, talk to other entrepreneurs. I would not be afraid of talking to people about what you want to do. Um, I don't think people really steal ideas. And in fact, in my world, we don't even sign NDAs anymore. I talk to so many businesses. You just don't really see that because action is not widely taken. So take the action to network with other cannabis entrepreneurs or just entrepreneurs that are similar in business. It doesn't even, you don't have to match up cannabis to cannabis to really learn from people or find true partnerships. And I think Ari and I have a lot more that I'm sure we'll decide to spend our Tuesdays on because I don't know what I'm going to do next week. Not seeing you, Ari, but there's incubators all over New York. Koffman is not the only one. I don't want to be selfish and say we're the only incubator, but there are business services all over. And yes, if they are federally funded, you may not be able to talk cannabis, but you should always be able to talk about business modeling with people.
Yeah.
And you know what? And if there's no place to go and there's entrepreneurs around you, start a group, connect with people, and we will all find each other, my friends. I am pretty sure of that.
Yeah, no, I'll just add to that, Eric, because it
Please.
was a really nice question. First of all, I should say anybody I'll speak for myself. Anybody is welcome to email me anytime, and to the extent that I can be helpful, I'd love to be helpful. I think um, a lot of the people who are participating in this program are kind of early adopters, and we're still a few months out with kind of the cannabis licensure process in New York, and I think that we're going to start seeing really an ecosystem of incubators, accelerators, whatever we want to call them, different programs to support entrepreneurs. I think we're going to see CUNY in New York City get into that space. I'm a proud Queens College alum. I've spoken to the college about this. I think they're very serious about trying to do something for entrepreneurs. In fact, they're already starting some programs. I know you obviously represent SUNY Binghamton. I've spoken to other SUNYs. So I think that in communities really throughout the state, we're going to see more and more activity and a real support network for cannabis entrepreneurs. New York doesn't just want, Eric, you know this, doesn't just want tax revenue. It wants to see a diverse cannabis industry. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is with the MWBEs and other people who are participating in programs like this. So, I believe that's going to happen. We have another question. Are you able to sell goods outside of cannabis products in a dispensary? Can you sell branded items at the point of sale? Absolutely. Absolutely. There are some restrictions on products that in a traditional dispensary you may not be able to sell certain food products or beverage products. And I'm not talking about edibles. I'm not talking about cannabis beverages. But in terms of t-shirts, caps, any kind of swag, you can absolutely do that. It actually has a much more favorable tax treatment, and there are a lot of additional opportunities to earn revenues, to generate revenues at dispensaries. So, great question, Jennifer. And later today, when we get to hear from Jean Sullivan, she also has some great resources, which we've already posted on the OG Accelerator webpage of the Koffman Incubator. And if for whatever reason you missed it, we'll make sure to include it in a wrap up email. So let's take our 5 minutes now, and we're going to be joined just in a few minutes with Brian Murray from Acreage Holdings, Peter Prevost from Bridgewest Consulting, and then last but certainly not least, our final speaker for the accelerator is our good friend Gene Sullivan. So we will let's take a 5 minute break, guys, and reconvene here in 5 minutes for the next phase.
There we go.
Hey Eric, I so we're just let's get our next slides up, and Peter, you could wave hello to everyone. You're our second speaker for this segment of the program, so we're going to see you in just a few minutes. But great to see you this evening. So thank you for joining. And I'm just waiting uh, for Brian to join us. So let's give him a moment or two. He may be running into some tech issues, but we do have the rest of our panelists here. Eric, I don't know if I mentioned to you, but and I know this is not big news because unfortunately so many people have been dealing with COVID. But we had our first COVID case in our home. It's our
Is everyone okay?
Everyone's okay, thankfully. Our little 8-year-old got it, and he's been a trooper, and somehow magically we're all still negative. But it's really tough isolating an 8-year-old. So I wouldn't say he's fully isolated and quarantined, but as you know, as much as we can do.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
No,
On a
thank you.
I feel like I've been
more comical,
dodging it all spring.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So, and I know so many people have had real hardships during the past 2 years or so, and thankfully we've been spared. But
hmm,
just trying to deal with that. Um, okay, well, this is a good time while hopefully Brian is joining us. I'm just trying to monitor my email uh, in case in case he reaches out. So we'll give it another minute or two. But I want to review what we've really accomplished together.
yeah, great.
Um, you know, in 8 hours, there's certainly you don't get a master's degree in 8 hours, but I do think that we really been able to cover a lot of important topics that hopefully can help guide entrepreneurs' decision-making process. And I just want to recap law and policy. We had Jeremy Unruh from Pharmacan. We had Nigas from Columbia Care talking about the MRTA, the legislation that governs the New York cannabis market. And we actually, Liz Kruger, as you remember, she was away that week. She had sort of an emergency protest she needed to go to, but she joined us that second week,
Great.
and she's the lead sponsor of the MRTA. So what a treat it was to host State Senator Liz Kruger.
Great speaker.
We then heard from my good friend Eric Greenbaum, who's the Chief Scientific Officer at Goodness Growth Holdings, and he really walked us through the science behind the cannabis plant, and helped kind of give us a behind the scenes look at what does it mean to run a cultivation facility, what does it mean to run a processing facility, what goes into that. And then we had Franklin Henderson from the New York Cannabis Growers and
Yeah.
Processors Association, who sort of shared his personal journey and his relationship with the plant. And he is a guy, I mean, I was so inspired by his story. You'll remember, Eric, he is somebody who lives in Brooklyn, works in a public school, teaching kids hydroponics through the Cornell Extension Program, and travels once a week to Ithaca to get a master's program in horticulture or some
Yeah, at
specific
Cornell.
at Cornell, and he's a dad of a young kid, and he's going. I know it. I visited you in Binghamton. It takes time. Ithaca's an hour, out, and wow. I mean,
I mean, I
such
don't like traveling 10 miles down the street, and it's yeah.
really such a drive and focus. So inspiring to hear a story. Last week we focused on retail and marketing. We heard Ashna Lappin, who I had the pleasure of working with before, who's was a pharmacist by training, worked in the largest retail pharmacies in New York, and then ran a network of dispensaries in New York and beyond. And that was really helpful of understanding what you need to think about when you're trying to launch a dispensary.
And
All
just to
the
interrupt real quick,
Yeah,
or I apologize, all these videos videos are being uploaded to YouTube, so you can access. We have the first two. The third should be up today. We had some difficulties back home, and the fourth will be up tomorrow. But if you go to the bottom, or actually, I think we have a button on the top now. So if you just go to the page you registered, thekoffman.com, and under programs, you'll find OG. And right there, you'll see a button. You can watch all these videos again and really learn from all these amazing guests that we've had on.
Yeah, no, thank you, Eric. I think that's exactly right. And last week we also heard from Akili Parnell from Lantern. Lantern's actually also running an incubator program, and that was included in the email I think that we sent out on Friday. So the link is there. And we were also joined by Nikki from Local 338, who told us about the labor peace requirement and how entrepreneurs can kind of go through that process. And that brings us to today, when we're really here to talk about the financial aspects, the fundraising aspects. And, I thought it would be interesting to kick this off with our special guest, Brian Murray, who's a good friend. I have the opportunity of working with him in two states to talk about the community relations piece, because it's not just about the money. When you launch a cannabis business, you are inevitably launching in a community, in a neighborhood. It might be your own neighborhood that you grew up in and you already own a business in, or it might be a new neighborhood that you're not known to. And that becomes even trickier because you need to build trust and you need to develop a relationship with the local community. And that's really important in this industry. As rapidly as the industry has evolved over the past few years, there still is a stigma associated with this stuff, right?
And I think no matter, even if the county or your city says it's completely legal for you to set up whatever operation you want to set up, it's still important to make sure that the community is on board too. If even though it's legal, it's good to have community partners.
Absolutely.
Just went through
So,
this the other day. We're expanding here, and on the phone with a pastor, and we looked at his webpage, and it was an interesting church, the church, the Cowboy Church, it's called, and we were like, oh, these guys are going to love us. And we get on the phone, and he says, absolutely not.
yeah, no, that's great, Peter. That's really important to know. I think you're exactly right, and religious leaders are part of the discussion, and are often an important part of the discussion. There's certainly sensitivities there. So we accomplished a lot together, and we still have a way to go. And I see that. That Brian, I believe, has just joined us, and let's see if we can get him on video. Let's give him a second to connect here.
Kind of the whole Zoom world. I've been using it for 2 years straight now, Ari. I feel like I still haven't mastered how to properly use Zoom sometimes.
No worries. A few moments ago we were thanking the participants, but um, the panelists and the speakers have taken really a lot of time out of their very busy days, and we've enjoyed top talent in our speakers, and we know how what the demand is on the time of people like Peter and Gene and Brian. So the fact that they have been able to join us is something we really deeply appreciate. I see that Brian's computer is kind of struggling to connect, so we're going to give him another minute. And if he can't connect,
I think we're on. I think we're good.
all right, let's see. Let me see if we could unmute Brian. There he is. Brian, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can. Thanks so much.
Oh, what a pleasure. We were getting worried there that we would somehow not be able to host you this evening, but here you are.
Here I am. Here I am. Thanks so much, Ari. What a pleasure to be here with you all.
Oh, thank you, Brian. A real pleasure to host you this evening. You and I have the pleasure of working together in two states now, both in New York and New Jersey, and it has always been great working with you and really learning from you. You've assumed leadership positions really in multiple states, so it's really been great working with you. I wanted to invite you this evening, Brian. You and I had a chance to discuss this a bit. Really, tonight is the fourth session of a four-part series. We did law and policy. We had people like Jeremy Unruh, and we had Nigist from Columbia Care. Um, we've had cultivation experts, processing experts, retail experts. Today we're talking about the financial and fundraising aspects. And we have two amazing speakers. We have a CPA, Peter Prevost, who's going to speak in a few minutes. We have Gene Sullivan, who's going to be our final speaker, who's a lifelong career in private equity. So we have that. But I think what sometimes gets forgotten is forgotten is any cannabis industry any cannabis business by definition is in a community. It's in a neighborhood. It's physically located somewhere, right? These are not online businesses where somebody can be in the middle of nowhere. It's if you're growing cannabis, you're growing in New York. If you're selling cannabis, you're selling in New York. And I thought it'd be really interesting for you to share a little bit about your background, but also to talk to us about how you think about community relationships. How does somebody, particularly if you're operating in a community that you have not been a member of for a long time and you're going to someone else's community, how should entrepreneurs think about that stuff? So I wanted to welcome you this evening, and maybe we kick off the conversation. If you can go to the next slide, Eric. You've had such a fascinating career. How did you wind up in the cannabis industry, my friend? I mean, you usually don't see the path from Pfizer to cannabis. I know you've done also great things in the nonprofit and religious sectors. How did you wind up where you are, my friend?
Wow, it's a circuitous path, Ari, but I'll keep it short. Cannabis and I had a relationship back in college. It was a great breakup, but it was a breakup nonetheless. And it was interesting actually when I was at Pfizer, I got into government relations. But one of my favorite roles at Pfizer was doing advocacy, and I had New York and New England. And whenever we were trying to expand access to medicines through legislation, one of my roles was to go out into local communities and find advocates, people who cared about this and that were impacted by the lack of access, and see if they'd be willing to mobilize and be a part of an effort to see change. And I think what that kind of ingrained in me was this idea that things might happen at a state level, but the state is comprised of individuals, and as you said at the top, communities. And when I worked at Pfizer, we were based in New York. We had operations in different places, and getting out there and being a part of the community, letting people feel and touch me and others, because I now at Acreage am a representative of the company. Well, I don't want people to think of Acreage and to think of Lexington Avenue in New York. That's very ubiquitous, nebulous, not quite sure who or what that is. But when individuals in the community have an opportunity to interact with Brian, it's very different. And so they think of Acreage as Brian, or Acreage as, one of our general managers, or someone else out there. And so we try to be in the community so that we give a personal feel to our operations. I remember when I first got in this role, Ari, uh, in New Jersey, I went and established a relationship with one of the townships for that same reason. They needed to know that there was an individual that if anything happened, they could pick up the phone and they could call Acreage, but they just weren't calling Acreage or the botanist, is who we do business as in New York. They were calling Brian. And I think that's really important as cannabis operators. in particularly as well, let me just say this parenthetically, is because cannabis is not like operating a doggy daycare. People kind of know what that is. It's very agnostic, if you will, but cannabis is different. While I'm a supporter of cannabis, and you are, and I imagine anybody on this webinar, there's still a lot of people, as we see in New York. Not all towns opted in. We've seen this in New Jersey. Not all towns have opted in. We see this in other states where it's still hard to get a lot of traction around legalization bills. So cannabis, while we are friends of the industry, there's still people who have a lot of misinformation about cannabis and a lot of concerns. And so I don't think we can take the approach when we enter communities that we're right. And if you don't understand us, you're wrong. And we're just going to kind of come in and run roughshod. That's not the approach. There's a lot of education that needs to take place within communities and with community leaders in order to help people feel comfortable with cannabis. Even those towns that have opted in, everyone in the town probably didn't vote, right? So it was, city council or somebody else opted in, but it's our responsibility to make sure that individuals in that town feel comfortable with our operations, understand what it is that we do as a cannabis responsible regulated cannabis operator.
Yeah, no, I think those are all great points. And Brian, we have spoken before. We come from different religious backgrounds, but nonetheless from religious backgrounds. How do you go about speaking to a local religious leader, a local member of the clergy who has made it known that he does not want a dispensary in town? How do you have a conversation like that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So I'm in Tennessee, and it's a very conservative place. A lot of, the Southern Baptist. This is home for Southern Baptists, and so when friends of mine hear about cannabis, um, what I've come to realize, Ari, is most Americans want the same thing. I mean, we might want it differently, but at the end of the day, a lot of us want the same thing. We want to be healthy, happy, reasonably prosperous. We want our kids to do well. We want our communities to be safe. Where it breaks down is how you make that happen. I think the conversation starts with what is it that you want for your community, and then realizing I want the same thing. I think sometimes also you have to bring data. Data is important when it comes to cannabis because a lot of the prohibition that occurred in cannabis ignored the data, and it was all based on bias. And so I think, it's important that when we talk about cannabis is safe and effective, it's wrapped up in some type of data and objective data that people can look at. Also, but it's respecting that people have a right to have their religious views and they have a right to have objections. And I think it's for us not to try to get somebody to yes in one conversation. I look at it as a Likert scale where maybe somebody's at a 3. Well, can I move them to, 10 being, on board with cannabis? How can I move them further to the right in a conversation? Because I call myself like a can evangelist, right? So I'm not gonna, if you're at a 1, you're not moving to a 10. But if I can get you to a 2 or a 3, and we can have that conversation, I think that's important. So one is I use data. Two is I would look at a win as not this person leaving the conversation saying the same thing I say about cannabis, but just saying something different or thinking different. And I think the third one is to understand what are the real objections that people have, and take that back and see if there's anything that an individual entrepreneur can add to that. The last thing, sorry, what is partnership. I think is important with the faith community that we try to form partnerships. Now, chances are you're not going to be able to stand up in the lectern, and give a speech at Sunday Mass or whatever else it is, or Saturday at a synagogue. But is there something that the religious organization is trying to accomplish that aligns with your company's objectives that you guys can work together in the community? Because again, this is where we recognize that most Americans want the same thing. Most organizations do. How can, at least for the community, how is it that we can partner together to see some of those things happen. And we're starting to see some of that in New York as well. Ari, we have not necessarily encountered that, but I know people will. But we've encountered it in other ways, and that partnership model has helped us overcome some impasses.
That's great, and I love your your framework of thinking of it as a spectrum, and it's not about convincing somebody who has developed their ideas over a 50-year period in a 10-minute conversation to move them from no to a yes. I mean, you just can't do that in life. At least I can't. But moving them a little, creating a slightly different perspective, opening their minds to a different way of looking at things. Well, maybe it is better for children that cannabis be sold in a regulated and taxed environment than in the back alley behind the school. Maybe Brian's point that it's easier to buy a joint than a six pack in New York City right now is a compelling point. And I think when you use data, when you use real examples, it really speaks to people. Um, I know that you do a lot of work, you, Brian, and Acreage, really across the country on what is called social equity. Why do you do that work? Why is it so important to you in Acreage?
Yeah, a great question. I think there's three things. One is, and you know this, and anyone on this call who's an entrepreneur in cannabis knows you have to get a license from the regulated into the regulators, but you also have to get a license from society. And the license to operate in cannabis is that you recognize the negative impacts of prohibition and that you're willing to do something in this space to help uh, negate some of that impact. And so I think from that front, it's really important. The other thing, though, is as I sit on the ELT at Acreage and I talk to employees, people want to do good in companies. People want to work for organizations that are, beyond just the dollars and want to go out there and make a difference. And I think what we've seen because of prohibition is we want to make a difference in that space. We want individuals who've been cannabis involved or justice involved to get their lives back. And so we do a lot of work in the states that we operate. And we're continuing to do more work with national organizations to find ways that we can help people. One, if they've have been involved in cannabis, like let's take Connecticut, for example. We just had a partnership with the social equity applicant where Connecticut created this framework. And this is a woman who's been in cannabis for many years. She helped her grandmother after she got sick get access to cannabis. She was a registered nurse and has always wanted to kind of get into this regulated industry, and we were able to partner with her. And now she owns 65% of this new company. She's going to have a cultivation center. She's going to have a retail dispensary. But also, we're doing stuff in New York where we're working with the organizations in New York to do training for individuals who want to get into the cannabis industry, but for whatever the reason, have different barriers in their way. And so we're partnering around some training. We're working with a national organization on like clean slate stuff because you probably know this, Ari. You can have a record expunged, but unless it's cleared, it can still be an issue for you. And so we're working on things of that nature as well. Expungements in New Jersey, really trying to find ways where Acreage can be true to who we are and help people. We can't boil the ocean. We can't become all things to all people. If we gave all our money away, it would help a few people, but then we'd be out of business and we couldn't help anybody else. So we have to be disciplined in our approach in how we help people, but that we help people is something that we resolved early on.
Hmm.
It's kind of like I'm married. I don't wake up in the morning and decide I'm going to be married today. It was a decision I made once, and unless she goes crazy on me, right? No. And then I just manage that decision, right? It's just the day
Sure.
to day I manage the decision. that's what it needs to be like when it comes to social equity in cannabis. Cannabis companies need to make the decision that we are going to be involved and engaged. And then day by day, week by week, month by month, and year by year, they just manage what that looks like. But that they do it needs to be a decision that they resolve before ever getting a license.
And no, those are all great points. I did read that exciting news story of how you guys are partnering Connecticut with a female entrepreneur of color. Is your I'm going to put you on the spot. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but is your preference that regulators really allow companies like Acreage to partner with social equity companies in a way like you're describing Connecticut? I mean, that seems like a really intriguing model.
Yeah, it is an intriguing model, and fortunately, it's one that works. I have seen also in other states, I won't mention any names, where the regulatory bodies don't necessarily invite the industry to the table to talk about what's the solution, how do we make social equity work. And so what you have is you have the regulators creating a framework about how the market's going to work. And without those who have skin in the game with how the market works, at the table talking about how the market works, I think you just miss a piece of the puzzle. And we're working in different states with lawmakers and regulators now to say, all right, well, here's the social equity goal. Here's what something could be a win for us, and here's a win for social equity. Can we bring those together such that we can create a regulatory framework where industry wins and social equity applicants win? And I think and I think what Connecticut did, which was smart, is they incentivized social equity applicants and industry to come and work together to accomplish the goals outlined by the statute. And to the extent that that happens more and more, of course, and you need the regulators to kind of avoid the nefarious actors that might be out there that would take advantage of people. That's very important. But assuming that the social equity applicant is legit, the company is legit, the regulators and the lawmakers have a very unique role that they can play in bringing them together to strengthen the marketplace and accomplish the goals of social equity.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I think Connecticut was very innovative in the way they approach this. Brian, we're getting close to wrapping up this conversation. Many of tonight's participants, like really the lion's share, are certified minority and/or women-owned business enterprises in New York. And from speaking to them, from receiving emails, from being on, part of the accelerator program, I feel a lot of passion, a lot of excitement, but also a lot of concern. Am I going to be able to raise the money? Am I going to be able to win the license? Am I going to be able to hire a staff? Um, what words of wisdom do you have for the entrepreneurs who are really excited about the cannabis industry but are a little bit on the fence now on should they get into this or not?
Yeah, that's a good question because we've all heard the stories about people who've mortgaged homes and turned in their 401ks, and like those are real stories. And I wish life turned out where everyone was successful
Yeah,
in everything we ever tried, but that's not true for you. It's not true for me. But there are things that we can do that allow us better chances at being successful. And I think part of it is making sure that an individual counts the cost well. It is extremely difficult to run a cannabis business. Um, and even though New York is going to give kind of a turnkey, here's the dispensary, here's the loan, and that's great, but it's really difficult, like you said, to hire the right people to understand the systems and the operations and the taxes and that's I don't say that to scare you. Don't be afraid of it. You can learn anything you need to learn. I mean, there's YouTube, but the idea is just to know what you don't know and then go out and educate yourself about it. I will tell you that I chair, as you saw here, the New York Medical Cannabis Industry Association. We oftentimes talk on our calls about how our organization and the companies within it are eager to share our knowledge with people who want to be successful in cannabis. And so I, I would absolutely reach out to different people and to see, okay, this is a knowledge gap. Where can I learn that? Because cannabis, even though we compete in cannabis like all businesses do, it's a different environment in the sense that we support each other internally. We compete externally, we support each other internally, and there are people there who want you to succeed. Like we all want you to succeed because we don't feel like your success is going to take away from my success. What your success is going to do is just create more success for the whole industry. And so I would say, please don't be afraid. Please don't. You can learn anything, and and if you keep the goal in front of you, you will succeed. Just don't give up on your dream. Keep it in front of you.
Wow, that is really a great message, and I not only want to thank you for your time, but it's been a pleasure working with you on the various trade associations that we work together. And I agree. I don't feel that the companies I represent are competing with acreage. Of course, they are competing with acreage. We're really competing with the illicit market, which is several X the size of any of the legal markets right now. So let's first take care of the illicit market, and then we'll talk about competition. But really, we need to work together, and I really feel that that comes from you as well, to create a business-friendly environment, to create an environment where there's justice, where there's social equity, where there's a diverse industry. There's so many ways we can be collaborating. So, Brian, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the work you do with Acreage and for all your leadership in New York, New Jersey, and beyond. It was really a pleasure hosting you this evening.
Thank you so much, Ari. Have a good night.
Take care. So, up next, we have, let me just get Peter to join us here. One moment. Let's see if we can get him on video. There we go. I'm just going to put you on the spotlight. One second. All right. Peter, how are you this evening, my friend?
I am well. How are you, Ari?
I am doing great. Where are you? I know where you're sitting, but why don't you share with folks where you're located?
So yeah, I'm at my home office in New Orleans, Louisiana. I have been spending most of my time for the past few weeks in Baton Rouge at the state capitol, and it's a rare day for me to be in New Orleans during the week. But we had some key meetings down here, and so I'll be heading back to Baton Rouge after this presentation.
And Peter, I know you work as an accountant and as an advisor to cannabis businesses throughout the country, but that you're also involved in the Louisiana industry. And really, as we know, as our participants know, every state has their own set of rules. Just very briefly, where are things at with cannabis in the great state of Louisiana now?
We
What
have
kind of program is there?
yeah, it's a very unique unique model, and I think what Louisiana really did was try to develop a true medical system, a system that could survive and thrive beyond adult use. And it really wasn't a mask for for creating a framework that would be just laying the groundwork for adult use. And so what we've done here is we have two growers, but our growers are contracted. Our grow licenses are held by our university. So Louisiana State University has one production license, and then Southern University has the other production license, which is great because we had social equity from day one, with Southern University being historically Black college and university. Those colleges were then given the right or the option to partner with private companies should they decide to go ahead and operate these facilities. Those two facilities are up and running today. We've got a very large facility in Ruston, Louisiana, that LSU is collaborating and operating on. And we also have a large facility in Baton Rouge that Southern has built. And those two facilities feed nine pharmacies in Louisiana. And we do only have nine today, but there's a lot of talk about, how we can get that number up and get better patient access. We're reliant heavily today upon home delivery and e-commerce and things like that. But these pharmacies are staffed by a licensed pharmacist, and he has to consult every patient just like he would any other medicine.
Sure.
We have pharmacy techs, and so it's a very interesting system, and it's growing rapidly.
It's really fascinating to me how each state really has its own regulatory framework. Certainly, there are similarities, but Louisiana really is a unique state, and all of these things evolve. One state learns from each other, and they just evolve over time.
I see someone in the chat made a shout out to Dr. Shonda, and well deserved there, a good friend and colleague of mine, and she's done so much for the market here and nationally. I had to acknowledge that comment.
Yes, no, for sure, Peter. So, Peter, you have such an impressive background. You're a licensed CPA. You have a master's degree in accounting from LSU. You have a bachelor's degree in finance. You worked at some of the largest corporations, whether it's TD Ameritrade, Ernst and Young, Turner. Why in the world did Peter Prevost get into the cannabis industry? What was the calling? What really motivated or inspired you to get involved in the cannabis industry?
I got to say, it was really a blessing for me being a guy from a small town in Louisiana with a financial background. People with a financial background, particularly CPAs, were afforded an early entry point into this industry because we were in such high demand because of 280E and some of the other complex banking regulations. And then, you pair that with firms like Ernst and Young, my former employer, and some of the larger groups out there had a unwillingness to work in this business. So there was a vast need and there was no one to fill that need. And I think if were an entrepreneurial CPA or financial advisor or someone of that nature like myself, it was very clear, to see that opportunity. And I was, fortunate enough to meet the founder of Bridge West at an NCIA event back in 2013. And it really captivated me, and I saw the work he was doing, and I made a point to track Jim down and befriend him, and he became a mentor to me, and things just kind of gradually progressed from there.
Amazing, amazing. And I also know that you were and are a passionate advocate for the medicinal use of cannabis. And that was inspired in part by personal reasons. If you're comfortable sharing, great. And
Yeah,
if
no,
not, that's fine too.
no, I can absolutely share a couple of. I'll be quick, so I don't want to take too much time with that. But the opiate epidemic hit my family in a really hard way. It's been a very difficult situation. My father was injured in the mid '80s, and he was a part of the misrepresentation by certain pharmaceutical companies that it wasn't an addictive chemical, and that led to some really unfortunate circumstances in my life. And ultimately, it's my brother's no longer with us, and my father's life was forever changed. And I got to think that if medical cannabis had been available, that maybe things would be a little bit different, in that part of our life.
Wow, my heart goes out to you and your family. But you are really inspiring in the way that you took some of those unimaginable challenges and you channeled that into your advocacy work. So I want to thank you for that, Peter. Really, really
Absolutely.
amazing. Really amazing. So let's jump into it. You have a tremendous amount of information and knowledge to share. So, Eric, let's go to the next slide here. Um, let's jump into it, Peter. I know you have a lot of important things to share with entrepreneurs and that you regularly work with entrepreneurs across the country. So I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to start here to really show the folks on the call who are still trying to understand the larger picture, what's been going on up until this point in the industry as far as funding, right? Because when you're thinking about your business plan and what's the secret sauce, just like any messaging, you want to think about, well, what's my audience? Who am I presenting to, and what am I trying to communicate to them? And this list really shows the mechanisms that have been available to entrepreneurs up until this point to fund these businesses. Given that your large banks or even your small banks are really out of the picture, we're starting to see some changes there in the future, but the SBA, all these organizations that you would typically go to fund a startup venture aren't available. And so these are really a pretty concentrated list of what people have done in the past to get these businesses up and running. And when you think about this, you see kind of a linear path here, but it doesn't have to be that way. These things could occur in tandem, but ultimately, this is kind of where we're playing at today. And so, you have the, obviously bootstrapping and self-funding and things like that some people are able to pull off, friends and family being involved in a loan capacity, taking on equity partners and things like that. And then, as New York has started to evolve, we're seeing, the potential for state-based social equity loans and cannabis-specific investment groups and things like that. And so all these options are available. And I think that as a business owner, you definitely need to pursue all of them and figure out what's the best fit for you. One piece of advice I always give to folks is that, if at all possible, try and self-fund, bootstrap, or don't give away too much equity during the application phase, because you'll be in a lot better position to negotiate in the future if you've got that application and that license in your hand. If you start giving away equity in the beginning, it can often be difficult, and the cap table gets crowded, and at that point you realize that there's not a lot left for the people that maybe started the business. And some of the things at the end of the list, or capital brokers, alternative lenders, equipment loans, those are certainly probably more relevant once you're operational. And so just kind of thinking through that, if you've gotten your license, then maybe at that point you can pursue one of the state specific social equity loans. You can also pursue a cannabis investment group like ArcView that we're going to hear from later. And you may at that point, once you're operational, have the documentation that a capital broker or an alternative lender who does receivables factoring or things like that would want to see. And then, as you continue to grow, you can look for equipment loans. So the list is somewhat linear, but you have to pursue all avenues when you're going through this business. And things change quickly, and you have to be fluid in your plans.
That's great. And Gene's going to speak a little, more about fundraising strategies. I know that you've written so many great business plans and work with entrepreneurs to write business plans. Tell us a little about that. Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, so this slide, was something I wanted to share, and this is survey data from MJ Biz Daily, a publication I think a lot of us in the industry follow pretty closely. And realistically here, what I'm trying to show you is what not to do, right? And this is survey data from people who I self-identify as cannabis investors. And in that regard, I'm really going to focus on the top four because I think they're the most relevant. And you see what we're looking at here. Incomplete and inadequate business plan, limited team education and experience, right? Baseless and unsubstantiated financial projections or valuation, and grandiose statements. And I think that items number 3 and number 4 kind of do move together. And I think the real takeaway for me here is make sure that your business plan is a complete package. Spend some time developing your team, in a lot of different ways, and make sure that you've got the best foot forward in that regard. And, ultimately make sure that you can be reasonable, show complete data, and substantiate that data.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is a really great slide. Walk us through this. I mean, the team, the real estate, the resource planning, this is really what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to say, my goal here was for, the participants to walk away what I would call, a foundational planning checklist, right? I mean, it's very pertinent in New York today because we don't have the regulations. We don't have the complete playbook by which we're going to operate in the future. And we're going to get numerous details, and we're going to learn a lot more about what the regulators are looking for along the way. And, one thing that I always think about whenever, I'm crafting a business plan or a financial model is what do the regulators want to see, because what the regulators want to see is ultimately what the investors want to see, and those two things don't operate in a vacuum. They very much move in tandem. And so as I'm going through this checklist, as I'm going to call it, is really critical. And these are things that really shouldn't change a lot, with the regulations. These things are still going to be relevant no matter who you're talking to, right? If you're talking to an investor, if you're talking to a potential partner, if you're going to a municipality to try to get approval, that's another reason why you might need a business plan. You also may need a business plan to secure your real estate and show your landlord what you're looking at doing, so that the landlord is comfortable renting to you and has confidence that you'll be a viable business. And so, in going through these, I'll start with the team, because I really always think that, and I think Gene will back me up here, VCs, they don't always think about they're investing in the business. They're investing in the person running the business, right? And I think that's always something you should consider. And so, when you're thinking about it, if you don't have a good team or a pathway to expand that team, I think you're going to look like you're maybe at a disadvantage to someone that does have these things. And so, kind of going through the list, local partners, we have key managers, consultants, right? Those things in the early days of licensing, especially in medical, we used to see a lot of points on applications allocated to prior experience in cannabis specifically. Experience in other industries is also valued, but realistically, the regulators in the early medical licensing were really looking for people who had done it before. And that's because the industry and the public perception were all at a very different phase then. And now we're seeing a complete paradigm shift from that, where the regulators and the community at large, well, they want to see good people invest and good people get involved, but they also want to see locals own these businesses and locals be involved. And I think New Jersey is a great example of that. If you look at what they did in certain categories to apply for certain classes of license, like their micro business license, you had to be from that county or in an adjacent county in order to even apply. And so, that's really a paradigm shift. But I think that if you can put together the complete package, right? If you can have that local representation, but also have the knowledge, well, then at that point, you've really just put yourself in the best position possible. And that kind of ties into identifying your key managers. If you're in cultivation or if you're in manufacturing or retail, those are obviously all very different skill sets. Some are more scarce than others. Whenever you're thinking through this process and trying to identify those key managers or partners, you got to realize that this industry moves fast and that the talent pool will shrink the longer that you wait. I mean, there's only so many people that have experience cultivating marijuana and are going to be able to do a great job at it. And so if you wait till the end to start forming your team and getting your partnership together, the good people will likely have already found a home with another company, or they have started their own venture, because we see this, the entrepreneurial spirit is obviously alive and well in the cannabis industry. And also thinking about the state specific requirements, because sometimes they will identify very, very specific things in the regulations or through other means of communicating that, we would like to see a medical director, or we'd like to see some sort of commitment to research. And you want to build those things into your team from day one to make sure that A, you're meeting the regulatory requirements, but B, that you're going to be able to deliver with what the regulators want to see. And, obviously diversity is something that's been a hot button issue in the industry. And it's, one of the most common talking points now in the social equity argument. And so, and it's obviously a very relevant argument. I mean, you look at some of the statistics on it, New York alone, I think you're, 10 times more likely to get arrested if you're a person of color. We're seeing 1 million people incarcerated. I mean, this is an opportunity to right those wrongs, but you have to think about this early on and get the right group of people. And also just to make sure you've got the right personalities and that everyone can work together fluidly and that everyone really wants to be involved and pull their weight. And so team, really all of these aspects, but team in particular is one of those things I don't think you can ever spend too much time on whenever you're doing your planning.
I totally agree, Peter.
Yeah.
If you can take us quickly through two or three items on both real estate and
Yeah,
resource
absolutely.
planning, because I want to make sure that we leave enough time for 280E, which is like one of your many areas of expertise.
Absolutely. So, thankfully in New York, at least for retailers, we were given some pretty good guidelines in the actual legislation itself, and that tells us that we need to be 500 feet away from schools and 200 feet away from houses of worship. So obviously, as you're digging through, various options for real estate, those are things you want to consider. And I know some people may be thinking themselves, "What do I really need real estate at this point in the game?" Um, Legally, you don't need it, but if you're seeking investment, it's a great thing to consider and to get locked in as soon as possible. A, because of scarcity, just like I mentioned with team, the good real estate's going to go away the longer that you wait. And so getting that done quickly and having that on your business plan really just shows your investor or whoever your partner, whoever you're trying to present this information to, that hey, this business actually has a chance of getting off the ground, and this business, has a path forward. And so, the zoning for retail is probably the trickiest. For manufacturing and cultivation, the light industrial areas do seem to be kind of a standardization across the country. But, again, those are things you want to all factor in whenever you're trying to start early and get ahead of the game. And, making sure that whenever you are negotiating a lease, that you've got the landlord knows exactly what you're going to do, because in most states you're going to need a statement from the landlord, acknowledging that this business will be a marijuana related business. And option agreements are something I always want to make sure that entrepreneurs who are just getting involved are aware of, because that's something that the big guys use every day, right? If you find the perfect property and you can negotiate with the landlord to either give you a first right of refusal or an option to rent or purchase in the future, and you're usually going to have to pay some sum of money for that, but it won't be as much as paying rent every month. And so I want to always make sure that new entrepreneurs to this industry are aware of that trick, because that's really the model that a lot of people are going to use. Shifting over to resource planning, obviously the detailed financial model is in a lot of ways the foundation of the business plan. You want to have key performance indicators. You want to be able to show your output or your throughput if you're in production or cultivation. In all cases, you want to make sure you have a standardized set of financial statements that any business would have, and that's your balance sheet, your income statement, or your cash flow statement. Anybody in investing or partnering is going to want to see that. Ultimately, you want to be realistic in those targets, and that kind of ties into the grandiose statements that I mentioned earlier. You don't want to show a financial model or a business plan where you're assuming you're going to be purchasing at retail for Oklahoma prices and selling at Massachusetts prices, because that's just not the law of the land. That's not how these markets are set up. Being able to demonstrate your capitalization requirements and show realistically that you put some thought into your startup cost and what it's going to take you to get the business off the ground. And that includes your equipment, your real estate, and you need some runway. You need 3 months at least for a retailer, and probably 6 to 9 months as a cultivator of operating expenses covered before you're going to make your first sale. And again, the market and supply chain dynamics, just showing that you understand the market that you're going to operate in, and that you've made a good faith effort to try and account for those things in your plan. These are the types of things that investors are going to want to see, and rightfully so. If you're asking someone to take a leap of faith with you, then I think they deserve to have the confidence in your team that you're going to spend the time on it. And lastly, regulatory changes, which once I wrap this up is a great segue. This industry, as you dive into it, and I think many of us, who have spent some time know that, this thing moves fast and it changes quickly. And so you need to kind of also demonstrate that you have a plan for the future. One great example of that is interstate commerce. When that happens, when marijuana is able to be traded across state lines, like alcohol or other products, some states are going to be at a huge advantage and some states are going to be at a huge disadvantage. So, where you land on that spectrum is obviously going to be specific to you and your company. And that's going to be a huge change when it does happen. But also at that same time, when interstate commerce happens, we'll likely see 280E go away and replaced with some sort of federal excise tax. So I think in your plan, you need to to demonstrate that you have a path to deal with these things.
Absolutely, that is great advice. Okay, yeah, let's spend 2 to 3 minutes on 280E before we wrap it up. But it is so important, as you and I know, Peter, and I've learned a lot from you on the issue of 280E. What is 280E? What should entrepreneurs be on the lookout for here?
Yeah. So, in the early days, this was a concept that was obviously widely discussed, but I don't think everyone understood it. And I think now it's becoming more and more common that people get it, and that, marijuana companies have been faced with this burden for a number of years, in that we're not taxed like other businesses. We're not allowed to deduct our selling, general, and administrative expenses. And, that really hits retailers the hardest. It hits everyone, but when you're in production, a lot of your costs are cost of goods sold, and you can control your non-inventoriable cost. That's a term for, you can control those a lot more when you're in manufacturing or production than you can in retail. And so, planning and accounting for that is critical. And, these are things like marketing. These are things like rent for retailers. And so, what we've seen in the past is that folks maybe didn't segregate their costs properly, or maybe they overspent in certain areas that they weren't aware were going to have severe repercussions, for their business later on. And it wasn't until maybe their first or second year of operations that they really realized they needed to control cost in certain areas and really track things meticulously in order to have a shot at doing this right, and also not violating the tax code.
Can
I have an
can you
example on
show
the
us an
next,
example?
yeah, example on the next slide, and it's really a tale of two companies, right? We've got two identical identical sets of of P&L here, and you see a non-cannabis business right next to a cannabis business. And so top line revenue the same, $1 million. We both spent 650 on COGS, and so that gets us to a gross income of $350,000. Right now we're all equal. Then you have your business expenses, and by that, that's that SG&A that I was talking about. Your selling, your general and administrative expenses, and so each company spent $200,000 on that. And so that gets us to a book income of 150. Now, the next line item is the critical line item where we have to do an add back. You can see that there's an adjustment made to the cannabis business's tax return, but we're going to add that $200,000 back in to your income. So instead of being taxed on $150,000, you're taxed on $350,000. And we're going to apply the same tax rate of 40%. And you can see the repercussions of this, that, both companies, end of the day, earn the same amount of money. They both earned $150,000. However, one of them is paying $60,000 in taxes, and the other is paying $140,000 in
So,
taxes.
so Peter, the non-cannabis business, and you're the accountant, so help me with the math here. The non-cannabis business has taxable income of $150,000, is paying taxes of $60,000, so their net income, their take-home profit, if you will, is $90,000 post-tax, which is really nice, right, for a small business. However, if you're the cannabis business, it's $150,000 of income minus $140,000 of tax. We're only left with $10,000 there. You can't raise a family with $10,000 in any state. I mean, am I doing the math right here? $90,000 for the non-cannabis business, $10,000 for the cannabis business.
Ari, you're doing the math. You're doing the math 100% correctly. And I think a lot of people are shocked to see this when they read the narrative in the news or the media, and they're going to be entering this new burgeoning industry, and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to be set for life. People don't realize that a lot of these companies today are really trying to posture and to get by, to get to a time whenever they're taxed more fairly. And
Yeah.
that's just the reality of what's going on in cannabis right now, and has been going on for a number of years.
Well, Peter, I can't tell you how much we appreciate your time this evening. I know how busy you are in Louisiana with all your advocacy work, so really appreciate it. Any parting words of advice for the largely New York cannabis entrepreneurs, although we have entrepreneurs for other
Yeah,
states?
absolutely.
Well, give us closing words of wisdom,
Yeah,
please.
closing words of wisdom is that New York, honestly, in my opinion, is one of the largest market opportunities still out there. To be, when you look at the landscape, with the population and just the culture of cannabis in New York that has existed for a number of years, it's a massive opportunity. They seem to be doing a really good job with social equity. I think that New York, if they pull off all of the things that they want to pull off, can really become a model for the rest of the country. And that's a huge opportunity. And I'd say that, I know it seems overwhelming. You're looking down the barrel of this process and all the uncertainty and all the things that go with it. The application process and the startup process is extremely emotional. It's extremely stressful. People always get caught up on, well, this company's doing this and these guys are doing this. And what I always say to my clients when we're going through an application process or a business plan or any of those is, let's focus on what we're doing, and let's just do the best job that we can. And you got to kind of ignore the noise, and you got to just do your best and work hard. And that's what it takes to succeed.
Peter, those are great words of advice. Thank you so much for making time and sharing your expertise with us. It was a pleasure having you, not for the first, but the second time on the OG Cannabis Accelerator. So thank you so much.
Ari calls, I'll always be there. Anytime.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, my good friend Gene Sullivan, the most patient person here. Gene, how are you on this fabulous evening?
I'm good now. This is what I noticed because I speak to audiences all the time. Are people going to be restless because I'm supposed to be finishing right now? Can we ask their indulgence for another 15 minutes, and I'll make it speedy and hopefully a little fun and funny too.
Gene, thank you so much for joining us. And I love when you talk about the 5 stupid things entrepreneurs do again and again. But before we jump into that, how did a former attorney and tech private equity leader get into the cannabis industry?
You had everything to do with this. It is your fault. I love telling telling on myself and this story. It's a great lead off, but let me ask the indulgence of your audience. Will you wait so we can get through the next 15
Yes,
minutes?
yes,
All right. I
absolutely.
know you will, but I want them to be patient. So I thank you for that. So look, I love telling this story of myself to show you my own stupidity. And by the way, something I'm going to share shortly is not only the completely silly things that entrepreneurs do, but that we as investors do too. So we are also at fault. And you need to know those things so you can be aware of them. But the part I like to share about my journey is this. I gave my kids hell when they smoked in high school, and I really didn't like it when people around me smoked. And they cannot believe that I am this fierce advocate for freeing the plant, for talking about wellness, for the science part, the business part. And what happened is I read Steve D'Angelo's book because John, my husband, joined you. How wonderful to have that journey back in 2014. And I said, I better learn this business. And I had just left my fund. We had a $400 million tech fund here in New York City. And I said, I better learn this. I went to MJ Biz and started my journey, read Steve D'Angelo's book. It's the first thing you'll see. If you look at my resources sheet, which I love sharing, it shows you all kinds of things to read and what to learn. And you can just pick up, what appeals. When I learn about how we still arrest all these brown and black men and boys, I couldn't believe it. I didn't know that. I didn't understand that the war on drugs is a war on people, on science, on research. But then, because I'm a 25-year tech investor, I saw this as the next big thing. And I have been all in since 2014. And it is the passion I have for the rest of my life. So,
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that, Gene. What an
well,
amazing story.
thank you. And I so love the opportunity to teach people, to learn from people, to help people, to connect people. This is my thrill. This is my give back, as well as, oh, it's, well, as you know, so interesting. Okay.
And I'll just share just for a moment. Folks, look at Jean's background. We are so grateful to have you. Jean is the co-founder of the ArcView Collective Fund. She co-founded a New York City-based tech venture capital fund with $400 million of assets under management. You're involved with Barnard College.
Yeah.
You're an attorney by training.
Yeah.
What a pleasure to have you this evening,
Quite
Jean.
too
Thank you
kind.
again.
Can I call you when I'm in a bad mood?
Anytime, anytime. Even when you're in a good mood, you can call me.
So, Ari, people ask me two things all the time. All the time, people ask me. It's like, why am I working in the cannabis industry as if I am Ruth from Ozark dealing in some kind of Mexican cartel? I am not kidding you. People go, why are you doing this? And the second thing they just got to know, do I smoke? Am I high right now? You would not believe the number of people that ask me that.
That's great.
So here is my best credential, even though this slide does tell a little story. My best credential is I have seen 1,000 times 1,000 deals. And I have seen hundreds and hundreds of cannabis deals. I was at MJ Unpacked this past week in New York City, which is where I live. And I was a judge for 17 companies. That was a real eyeful. And see, I do this because not only is it my give back to judge companies and help companies, but I learn from them too.
Sure.
What's going on? What's this company? What's this new vape pen? What's this new delivery service or a licensed person in license pursuit? So it's a great way for me to learn too. All right, so let's go. I'm going to share now quickly. It is the title of what I say. These are the completely silly things that entrepreneurs you just don't realize it. So what I'm proud to share tonight is kind of the final discussion in your wonderful, wonderful learning series is kind of a summary of many of the things you heard. Now, I've been on all night tonight hearing Eric's recap. I went back and I reviewed the first two sessions so that I could pick up some words of wisdom. You know, Ari, the first slide, it's not really complete there. See if you can
Oh,
wiggle it.
Eric, just hit next. There's some
Yeah.
animation there.
Yes,
There
yes.
you
All
go.
right, there you go. So one of the first things, now Eric spoke to this, and certainly uh, you just heard that in our discussion from Bridge West. I love that firm. It's a great firm. Uh, you've got to figure out what the heck you're doing in the way of a business model, and then what are your capital requirements? There's going to be a CapEx. And by the way, I love to say these discussions are just introductory. If I say a word you don't know, write it down and go look it up. And in my resources sheet, I have every possible help online or in a book that you can learn from. So I'm going to throw around a few acronyms. You may not know them, but write them down and then go figure it out, because today and these past, several weeks are just about opening the door so that you can learn and walk through that door. So you heard a lot about that business model canvas. You heard a lot tonight about how much money you need and how to look at that and how to create, a pro forma business model, which is critical, from Peter. So look, a big failing is when you walk in and you have no idea of either the CapEx, which means what you need to raise to build out your capital requirements. If you're building a dispensary, if you're building a cultivation, you're going to have a bill of materials. You're going to have to buy equipment. That's your CapEx. And then you're going to have an OpEx, your operating expenses, how much salary to pay people. I had a wonderful couple of people in my office recently, and they said, now, will our salaries be needed to figure out and put those in the budget? Yes, yes, ma'am, they will be. So you have to learn. And my words of wisdom, my pearls I just stress to you is there are many people around that you can pull into your circle to not only teach you that, but be at your side and help you look good and be good till you learn it. And so that's really an important thing. So I see this all the time. You don't raise enough money, and I'm sorry to say this to the terrific women in the audience. Women are big culprits on this. They really often don't know how much to ask for, and they don't raise enough. So get with it is what I like to say. All right, go to the next slide. The next thing that happens, this is my biggest pet peeve.
And just hit next every time twice. Sorry,
Yeah,
Eric. Go ahead.
good, very good. Thank you. So here's what happens. You finally get the meeting, and I'm going to talk to you about that. How to even get the meeting. Where do you start with fundraising? As you saw from Peter, you saw a lineup of the types of funds. Finally, you get the meeting. You would not believe how people cannot spit it out, cannot define clearly what you are building, product or service. I'll stop somebody 10 minutes in. What are you doing? Here's why it's so important. If I'm going to invest, and we've made 19 investments in our angel fund at ArcView, and in my life, I've made over 150 investments in my institutional investing, I will stop the CEO and say, what are you doing? Because I have to go to my partners and explain it. And if I can't explain it, you got no chance. So I think it's critical to learn how to package. Now, here's the big mistake. You get in front of me. This happened last week in the 17 companies that pitched us at MJ Unpacked. On and on about the product features and functions. That's important, but that's not the whole discussion. The discussion is to get to the business of the business. Eric, how you talked about you love business models and business, different revenue streams. I do too. But what I really want to hear is, what's your distribution plan? Or do you need that? Do you have a product that needs distribution? Well, what is it? What are you doing to execute? And so how you're going to make the product scale if you're building a brand, how you're going to get into multiple dispensaries, how you're going to build the product. Tell me that story, not tell me on and on and on about either the formulation or what's going on with how beautifully it's packaged and all that. Again, I stress that's important, but get to the business of the business. Okay, next slide. Now, while we're bringing up this slide, let me tell you something else. There's a one-liner that I've used in all my investing, and that is, we will take our wallet out and give it to you as CEO if you show me that you know what to do and how to do it. Remember that line. That's a really critical line. It's a classic line. So do you? Well, guess what? Just like Eric was insisting, and even Peter, you can learn this stuff. So many times, now I even heard Peter sneak this in. Oh, don't give away too much dilution. This is a big problem if you don't know how to speak about this dilution issue. Meaning, many entrepreneurs don't understand what they should sell in the way of equity. Meaning, if somebody's going to give you an investment, they're probably going to take, or they are going to take, an equity investment in your company. That means you're giving away a percentage of your company. Well, guess what? That gives you financing runway. That gives you the means, the CapEx and the OpEx to build your business. So you've got to understand the numbers. You've got to understand the capital needs. You've got to understand what margin is. And if I say to you, hey, this is your second round, what was the pre-money valuation of your last round? And you give me a blank stare, guess what? You got this meeting, you're not going to get the next meeting. Now, why is that? Because I want you to be a great steward of my money. I want you to understand this. And it's not calculus. It's not algebra. It's not geometry. It's actually multiplication. It's percentages. It's addition. It's division. And there are plenty of smart people, including Peter's firm and other smart finance professionals, to pull by your side. I was on a call today helping somebody. They had no P&L from past business. I expected one in today's meeting. And he started just telling me what was on the various line items. And I said to him, you must pull together a P&L. Go to your accountant, give me a P&L for year to date and fiscal year 2021. I will help you build a pro forma, but I need to see where you've been. And so those are the kinds of things that you need street savvy on. And so don't be afraid of dilution. You're going to need some dilution to make it happen. Sure, you don't want to give away too much, but there is a middle ground. Go learn what that can be. Next slide. Okay, now building a team, and again, this was on Peter's slide, it is critical. You will waste time and money if you hire the wrong person as your chief revenue officer, or as your chief operating officer, or as the CEO, if you're not going to be the CEO. You will waste so much time, you'll just set yourself back. So you better make sure you are really great at building a team. And if you're not, get some help. There's many now, great recruiters. They're out there. They've had a long track record now since 2014 or before in Colorado and California. And there's some very savvy firms. And so also you can pull people around you that you trust and have good instincts. So hiring the right people, that's critical for success. And here's what another issue, how the heck can you show a team if you don't have any money? Well, you can't, but guess what you can do? You can outline in your deck the functional hires that you need over the next 18 months. So let's say it's just you and your partner. Okay, that's pretty typical. And you're doing license pursuit for a dispensary. You might even be in one of those first rounds that's coming up in the New York area. Hey, that's great. You want to tell me, here are my next hires. Here's who I'm going to need. And by the way, they say to me, I know who I want to hire. I've been talking to them. They're going to leave their job as soon as we get funded. That's how you handle the team slide when you don't have any money. And then see this little tidbit? Stephen Jobs would hire just the best people, and he would have them tell him what's needed. Hey, I've been studying things for a month. Here's what needs to happen. So just a few pearls of wisdom there. All right, next slide. All right, now Notice it says how to get it over the finish line. Well, I didn't even give you many tips on how to even start this. Notice again, Peter as well as Eric have talked about friends and family. Now, I don't believe in family for the following reason. You got to look at them at Thanksgiving. I do believe in friends, though. I believe in people you used to work with, people you used to work for, your neighbors. Guess why? They already know you. You don't even have to tell them your name. You have to say, hey, Joe, I'm in license pursuit for a license in New York State. I've got a good chance. I've got a small team around me. Would you be willing to sit with me for 20 minutes and I can show you what we're doing? You don't have to explain who you are, what you've been doing, because they know maybe that you worked for them. And so that's the way to start. I'm with a lot of entrepreneurs and they say, I don't know who to go to. So I do that discussion with them and the aha moment occurs. Because the institutional investors are typically, not always, the next level after you get going. And I see a lot of people in license pursuit right now, and they are active, talking to friends and talking to people that they know to get that first few $100,000 to maybe pay for their lawyers, to pay for building the license, for paying for a finance professional to help them create a pro forma or their first tools. So you need 3 tools, in my opinion, to get the job done in order to pitch anybody. I believe in a one-pager that tells the story. I believe in what I call a forward-ready email. People they have the attention span of a flea. If I were going to help you, I want one paragraph. It could even be bullet points that says what you're doing. Then I can send that to somebody who might be interested in you. So you need to find investors who want what you have. They need to be the right stage. A lot of people don't want pre-revenue, pre-product, pre-team, pre-everything company. They want revenue. So you need to find investors who want to take the risk. You need to find investors who want your geography. People in New York are anxious to find you. They don't know how to find you. So that's encouraging. But let's say you know an angel investor in California. He or she may not want to invest in you because they're only interested in their home territory. But I can assure you that finally the ocean wave has now rolled and is rolling into the Northeast. It is very exciting for people like Eric and Ari and myself to be here, to be swimming in this wonderful opportunity. Believe me, it is going to be several years of chaos and confusion. But guess what? That's where opportunity lies, to be able to figure it out, to talk the talk, to know who to go to know how much funding to ask for, to know the numbers, to know what you're building. So all that you can figure out, especially if you get yourself help. So here's how to do that. I put this in the chat earlier, but I mean it to my core. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So it is really important to pull together what I think is your personal board of advisors now. If you're thinking of building a license or going for a license or building a brand or playing in the industry, but you're not sure how and you want to build a business, pull together your team, a small team, feed them pizzas and beer once every 10 days. Do it by Zoom if they don't live here. Give them some equity in your new company when you get it formed, and be organized, because guess what? Those first angel investors, that's who they're going to call. And they're going to say, is she organized? Does she know what she's doing? Are you going to invest? What do you think of the business? So there's your first little group. See, you got something to offer already. So there's some tools. And so then let me whip through now. It's all on one slide. My last slide, which are what investors screw up. We do so many screw ups. It's pretty shocking. First of all, and you need to know this, we throw money at deals we know nothing about. It took me 2 years, the last 2 years, we did invest in a synthetic cannabinoid company, building cannabinoids in a lab. I really it took me a long time to understand that business. We went to experts, we hired scientists. You know, I didn't pretend to understand that, but I had to figure it out before we took our wallet out. Just one example, I was on the phone yesterday with a very sophisticated investor, encouraging him to invest in a cannabis company. He had no idea what 280E was, no idea. And this guy runs a multi-million-dollar company and knew the company, but didn't understand. So, you know, there's lots of things that people don't understand right now. People are still saying to me, can I get high on this CBD tincture? So, you know, there's lots of knowledge yet to be learned by all of us. Number two, we way overpay on valuation. A real momentum gets going for a hot deal and we'll overpay. I'm really chasing an incredible brand. I didn't invest last year. I saw them at the conference last week. I asked him to pitch us. What are you raising? He said, I'm raising 5 million. What's the valuation? 50 million. 50 million. Are you kidding me? And I just deemed myself right there too stupid to have invested last year when it was far lower. It was like 15 million. Now, I'm not sure I'm going to pay 50, but I'm going to look. I'm going to look at his revenues. I'm going to see, has he got a multi-state expansion strategy? Does he know what to do and how to do it? Those are the measuring sticks I'm using to see that, to assure myself that I'm not overpaying. But we overpay. What does that mean, overpay? Overpay means that if somebody came and bought his company for, let's say, 60 million in a year, I pay 50 pre. He sells it for 60. Guess what? He's going to make a fortune, a fortune. I'm not even going to get a return, a multiple on that money. So see, that's why you shouldn't overpay or try not to overpay. And that's why you shouldn't ask for more valuation than an expected exit can produce. You follow me? So the eventual exit's important here. And in these early days, does it really matter? No, but keep this in mind because a lot of you are probably out fundraising or will be soon. I believe in what I call a win-win valuation. It's got to be a win for you so you don't feel like you gave up too much on dilution, but it's got to be a win for the investor so she feels like she's getting a value. So keep that balance in mind. It's really a balancing act. All right, now, another thing that we don't do very well is, do you understand the profile of the CEO? You know, we as investors, we have sometimes a know-it-all attitude. We know what you should do and how you should do it, but that doesn't matter. I had to learn that the hard way. It doesn't matter what I really think or what my strategy is. If I think they should go left and they think they should go right, going right is what that CEO is going to do. And so you follow me on that? I got to understand, is the CEO capable of going through the alligator swamp and figuring out what's needed on a strategy, on supporting her team, on getting the right kind of financing? Is that capability there? So that's what's important. And another terrible thing we do is we create terrible terms. I learned this early in my investing life. And that was often put warrants in place. Oh, if you make 10 million top line, then the valuation will be different. That puts you on a different side of the table than the entrepreneur. It's not a good idea. But investors do terrible things all the time, like terms that are just not appropriate. I don't believe in that. The right appropriate investor won't do that. And lastly, we keep throwing money at companies There's a saying in the business, feed the winners, starve the losers. And when it's angel money, our own personal money, it's hard to say this company's not working and I'm not going to keep going. That's really hard to do, to disconnect emotionally, but we do it all the time. So therein sums up, Eric, there's another slide, I think. So I'll post it on the site. I saw it and I've checked it for accuracy and being current. Go to the next slide after that. Here's a resource sheet. I update this all the time and you'll be able to click on it. It's on the site. It tells you what to read. It's got great ideas for later, great books on learning about investing. You can skim through them. You can download them on Audible or Kindle and kind of just skip around in them. It'll teach you all these buzzwords I use today and really show you the ways from some magnificent CEOs and entrepreneurs. And it'll also show you the things you should be reading every day or every week because you cannot know too much about this business. Okay, are there one or two questions I can answer for anyone? Because I know the hour is late.
Well, first of all, Gene, wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for sharing from your experience. We don't specifically have questions, but we have many comments. Someone loved the Ozark reference. Somebody says, as a former English teacher, Gene makes total sense to me. And then we have another person who says they love the resource sheet, and Jean Sullivan is my shiro. And she is a big fan, and my question would be, can she come over for dinner?
Okay, so listen, let me answer that. So many people ask to meet with me. It's hard to meet, but it is not hard for me to answer your email. If you write to me, I will answer you back. If I don't answer you, just hit me again on my email, and I put it in the chat earlier. I'll put it here again because I like helping people. It's my season of service. I especially am partial to the women, but there's a few good men I like to help too. So there.
And you've been a real mentor to me and to so many other
Thank you.
entrepreneurs, Gene, so we deeply appreciate it. As you know, there's so many minority and women business enterprise folks on the phone right now or on this meeting or participating in this Zoom webinar. What final piece of advice do you have to the minority, to the female entrepreneurs who are part of this accelerator program?
Look, I I'm so pleased that New York State understands what that's all about, that women are in the MRTA statute as social equity applicants. Get yourself a mini team and figure it out. You've got a chance. You got a chance to play. So play. But you've got to get the smarts. Remember my one liner. You got to know what to do and how to do it. You're not born knowing that, but you can figure it out. Bounce through some of those things I put on the resources. Send me an email. Send me your one pager if you want. I'll look at that. Oh, I just realized I talked about the tools. I said a one pager, a forward ready, but then I didn't say a short to the point deck, not some 50-page thing, some 15-page or less piece that outlines it. Put those tools together, get yourself a small team, and then find your way. There's plenty of people that want to meet you that have not invested in cannabis. They are awake now. They're looking for you. They don't know how to find you. And so you need to go where they are. And there's more and more gatherings, especially in the Northeast. Go to them. Go find those groups and engage and network. Thank you,
Gene,
Larry.
thank you so much. What a pleasure to have you again back here as our guest speaker. You are absolutely wonderful. We really appreciate your words of wisdom, sharing your expertise and your leadership in the cannabis industry. Have a lovely evening, and what a fabulous last speaker to our program here.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Gene.
Thanks so
Thank you so
much.
much,
It's
Gene.
my privilege. Thank you.
And Eric, we are now back to you. If you could just bring up the slides just for one more moment.
Yep. Here we go.
Okay, and Eric, we want people's feedback about 15 minutes ago, everyone should have received an email asking you to participate in a survey. Eric, can you share just very briefly why this survey is so important to the work of the accelerator, to the work of the Koffman Incubator? And it will take a few minutes, shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. Why would it be so super helpful for folks to fill that out?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to answer that. In the second, or maybe it was, I'm sorry, the third session, we went over customers and desirability and things that customers are asking for is what you're supposed to provide. Well, you folks are our customers. There may not be any transaction. We're doing this because we want to, but we want to continually evolve this program to answer your questions. And in fact, this year really was a reply to our first year. So the surveys really help us tailor the educational opportunity for your needs. And in fact, kind of like we heard today, investors need to hear from you. We need to hear from you. We need to hear how we can help you achieve those licenses and how you can be competitive, because we do want you to win. And so the feedback really is vital, because it really helps us create a better and better program.
Wow, that's really great. Thank you. Again, would love for you to complete the survey. We're so grateful that you took the time out from your busy schedules to participate in the Accelerator program. I hope that this has proven to be a helpful experience, but if there are ways that this program can be improved upon, please let us know. We don't only want positive feedback, we want the negative. We want everything, because we really strive for continuous improvement. Eric, so let's take the slides off and really turn to you for the final wrap up of this program and the final words. And I just want to thank the Koffman Incubator and your team. You guys have been absolutely excellent partners in this. And this was really a great accelerator program that has touched so many entrepreneurs throughout the state and beyond.
Well, I appreciate that. And in fact, I think you stole my initial lines. I really wanted to thank you, Ari, and Opportunity Grows. Folks, it takes a lot of work to get such high caliber speakers at all of these sessions, and Ari and Opportunity Grows certainly did that. And just to end in a pun, because why not? I love puns. New York State is the opportunity to grow. And we hope that this program gives you not just an opportunity to grow, but hopefully a little bit of fertilizer to get that seed working, because it is time, people. And our goal really was to help level the playing field by giving you the tools, the resources, the knowledge, and hopefully some encouragement to get out there and really be the best that you can be. And we all know that you can do that. So I wish you a wonderful night. I cannot thank you enough for joining us over, has it really been 4 weeks? It really doesn't seem like. I think we do this every time. But thank you all so much. Get out there and be awesome.
Thank you, Eric. Let's keep in touch, guys. Eric, thank you again. Thank you, everyone who participated in the Accelerator series. And we do very much look forward to keeping in touch through email and beyond. Thank you again, and have a wonderful evening to you and your families. All the best.
Have a great night, guys.